and welcome to another Generative Components tutorial. Today we're going to look at ways to export content to standard DGN files that can be utilised by different team members. So let's get started. So here we are in a basic GC file that contains a few cells and a solid to help demonstrate the export process. To investigate what we have, let's zoom in a little to the first group of nodes where there are a couple of points defining the start and end points of a line node. A series of points or coordinate systems have been placed along the line with some rotations. Finally, I placed a cell of a signpost on each coordinate system. And the solid has been created by simply 4 points, creating a polygon, and then a solid offset from the polygon. So let's start by dragging in an export node and zooming in to have a further look at the inputs. The first input is the nodes to export. And for this, we can link up the cell1 node. The next input we can look at will be the export seed file. You can simply select the 3 dots to browse for a file, or you can click on the square to open up the editor and input the path and file name. Here you can see I just pasted in the default neutral metric design seed file path inside quotation marks, as this is a text input field. And we can apply and close this window. Finally, we need to give the file a name and location. Similarly, you can select the 3 dots and browse to a location. For us now, I'm just going to input in inverted commas test export.dgn. One unique item on this node is the auto tick box. This will automatically export the selected nodes every time there is a change. Or you can turn this off and click on the export button when you're ready for an export. This could be a preference while you're working on updating the model. Switching over to the export file, you can see we have a series of signposts exported. And if we select one of those and focus in on the properties panel, you can see it's just a simple cell and it can now be used by any team member. Switching back to GC, let's change the export name to test export-multi.dgn. And for now, let's turn off auto update. Let's add the solid node to the export. This is as easy as linking up the solid node to the export node input. You can add as many nodes as you need. And what is great is you control what is exported. We don't need all the construction points or the lines, we just need the elements we need to focus on. And if we click on the export button and switch over to test export-multi.dgn file, we can see we have the signpost cells as before, but now we have a smart solid as well. So switching back over to the GC file, let's look at a way of automating the export for different design options. For now, let's hide the signpost nodes and the solid node, and unhide the orange nodes that demonstrate the options for the signpost locations. I'll drag the export node down next to those nodes, and let's have a look at what's set up. We have a signpost that this time is placed on a specific point that is controlled by a slider. And moving that slider will move the location of the signpost. So this is a very simple example, but it could be far more complex with sliders controlling vast arrays of geometry or data. So let's click on the export node for the nodes to export and delete the old information, and now we can link up this cell 2 to the export node. Before we do an export, let's change the export name. Let's change the export name to, in inverted commas, signpost, and then plus slider1.value plus, and inverted commas, .dgn. What this will do is include the current slider1 value into the export name, so each time we change the slider, the name's going to update automatically. And if we do an export, and we switch over to the DGN file, signpost5.dgn, it is, as we would expect, just a single signpost cell. Now we could go back to GC and change the slider and click export each time, and we'd have a series of exported options. Now I've used this approach when we're working through options, but what if you had a complex model with a lot of options you wanted to run? So there's an automated way to achieve this as well. So let's head back to GC. So clicking on the transaction tab, we can right click in the open space and select add script transaction. This will open up the editor window with some transaction information already pre-populated. What we're going to use is a simple loop to run through the different options we have. Clicking between the curly brackets, let's type the word for, tap tab a couple of times to automatically populate the for loop. Our signposts have 10 options, so let's change the word count to 10. Now inside the curly brackets, we need to tell GC what we'd like to do. So we'd like to change the slider each time. We can type in slider1, being the name of the node, dot value equals I, and then we can put in a semicolon. So each time the loop runs, the value of the slider will be changed to the value of I, which is increasing by 1 each time the loop runs. Now what we need to do is also update the GC model so this change is implemented. And that is done by the command update GC model, open and close brackets. And then we need to put in a semicolon. We can now click apply and close this dialog. We should probably rename this transaction by right-clicking and selecting rename, and I'm going to call this run all options. Now you can see the transaction is black or not played, and to run this transaction all you need to do is click on the black dot. But before we do that, we need to turn back on that auto option on the export node, so that each time GC is updated, it'll export a new option for us. So one thing to make sure is that this change was saved before our Run All options on the transaction list. So let's click on the Record Transaction button at the top of the transaction window, and you'll see a new transaction appears just above the Run All options. So now if we click on the black dot, all the options will be run and exported. And we can see the model updating in the background with all the different options of the signposts. And looking at the files in Explorer, we can see we have 10 files, one for each option. This process can be used for a variety of automations, from design options as we're shown here, through to automating, creating new files from Excel sheets. The possibilities are endless. In the next video, we're going to take a look at the law curve node and how it can be used to drive geometry. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.